Welcome to Pioneers of Pagonia and the most important tips and tricks that you should know at the start. And with that, you can master the most difficult maps. Because even if Pioneers of Pagonia is easy to manage for beginners, there are some challenges, and for this we offer you some tips and tricks. And via the timestamps in the video, you can jump to the places that are of interest to you or you would like to see again. Tip number 1. Don't waste any valuable space. Because especially on challenging maps, space is scarce. Therefore, it is advisable to place paths in such a way that you use areas that you can't build sensibly anyway. For this purpose, sand areas on the beach or in more impressible terrain are especially suitable. Tip number 2. Especially your most important initial industrial branches, such as wood and stone processing, should be planned as compact and already sufficiently dimensioned as possible. For this purpose, at least 2 lumberjacks, a forester, as well as a sawmill are recommended. We start here on one of the more difficult maps, especially with many opponents, with 3 lumberjacks, 2 foresters, 2 wells and 2 sawmills. With this, we also have no problems getting enough wood in the later game. And for stone, it is initially enough to place 2 quarries and a stonemason. For the beginning, the tasks overview on the top right, which you can activate optionally, is also very helpful. Tip number 3. Especially on maps with enemies, it is important to build a woodworker as early as possible. Because with this, we have completed the first part of the prerequisites for stronger troops, namely rangers. And as we see later, these are the most important troops in the game and relatively cheap compared to other units that require iron processing. Tip number 4. Plan right at the beginning enough space for residential buildings, a tavern and the necessary side buildings. Otherwise, you will later have the problem of not generating enough pioneers, not enough carriers, construction workers or troops. So, leave some space and set up the tavern as early as possible. Alternatively, you can pause them first. Because in general, you can reserve space by building buildings first and then pausing them. Tip number 5. Building roads in such a way that you can still place buildings afterwards is sometimes not quite easy. Therefore, it is advisable, as mentioned, to place buildings first and then the roads. Because this way you can use the available construction area optimally. Tip number 6. Don't forget to place market stands, corresponding S-banks and a mark fountain next to your tavern, and this as early as possible. These should be within the range of the tavern and your settlers. And in the beginning it is enough to build a vegetable farm for food supply or to commission a collector's hut with a collection of mushrooms. Because combined with some corn, you already have enough food to make your pioneers happy and you have met all the requirements for the production of new pioneers. Tip number 7. When building, make sure to define collection points so that, for example, a forester does not plant new trees everywhere. And in addition, you should activate, especially with lumberjacks, that these cut only fully grown trees. Otherwise, you will very quickly have no more wood supply. And this option with the setting up of a work area does not work for industrial buildings but also for troops for the acquisition of areas. And in addition, you have different filter options. So you can decide for yourself which goods should be produced preferably. And for production buildings such as the woodworker, you also have to specify which goods should be produced. Here we strongly recommend torches and spurs for the beginning. This allows you to control in which areas new raw materials are generated and where a demolition is preferred. Because this way you can also clear up space for construction. Tip number 8. Also build a tailor very early on. Because for our rangers, one of the best rooms in a game, we also need a light armor in addition to torches produced by the woodworker, which can be produced by means of leather via the hunting hut and the tailor. Because with that we have all the prerequisites for very strong units, especially at the beginning of the game. And as a nice side effect, of course, a hunter also generates food. And beware! A tailor can also produce fabric with flax, but the production of medium fabric or light armor would have to be activated manually, as only a production with leather is activated as standard. Because otherwise, your tailor only works with leather and you can have produced an infinite amount of fabric. Otherwise, you won't touch it. In general, you should make sure not to dismantle every piece of wood completely. Because otherwise there are no more wild animals to find that your hunter can hunt and you don't have any more leather. Because compared to the production of light armor, which you need for rangers and later also for even more specialized hunters, you actually only need one piece of leather. If you want to produce the whole thing with fabric, you need 5 fabrics, which first have to be produced. Tip number 9. Also build an adventurous guild early on, because here you can produce the specialized rangers and fear nodes. And in addition, a military academy, which you need for the standard guards and the standard troops. However, we strongly recommend that you do not fight with the normal standard guards because they are very weak. On the other hand, no thieves can be discovered and are helpless against bandits and mystical units anyway. Because we actually only need the guards to expand our borders and place border stones. For the fight, we should simply save these. And with a woodworker and the production of torches, as well as a tailor and hunters for the production of light armor, we can already produce rangers. And rangers are the only units that can recognize thieves and fight accordingly, so to speak, thief specialists. But their combat strength is also very strong. And again a comparison. To replace a good ranger squad, you would have to create veteran soldiers. These are very time-consuming to produce, expensive and not really stronger than a simple ranger. Because, thanks to the rangers, you can repel any thief attack in the future. And in addition, rangers can also detect and cover them up for all other units. So, this thief is also covered up shortly and does not get away with the prey. Tip number 10. Build as many small storage areas as possible in the areas where you cannot build any other production buildings. Because these are automatically filled with one material and can thus prevent and stand still in the various buildings and production chains. This accelerates your economy or optimizes it considerably, and the costs are relatively manageable. But you need a material for the storage buildings, which you can produce via flux and this in a farm. Alternatively, you can also collect free growing flux via the collector's hut. And as soon as your warehouses are ready, your production can also continue in buildings that currently have nothing to do. So we come to tip number 11. The different combat units, the different opponents and how you can use them. We have already mentioned thieves. And it is recommended in your various military buildings such as watchtowers or castles to replace the automatically selected guards with rangers by simply reducing the guards or increasing the number of rangers. Because as already mentioned, guards are not really effective for combat. So you lose a lot of pioneers very quickly and above all, valuable equipment. Because every guard also needs a lance, which you also have to make in the woodworker. Therefore, try to find a good mixture of specialized units in different military buildings. Here we have, for example, 8 rangers and only 2 guards. The guards mainly take care of the border expansion, and we let our rangers patrol. And via this patrol order, you can assign them areas and thus carry out an attack on purpose. Because especially against bandits who have a higher fighting power, it is also advisable to use specialized units in the fight. And the opponent types also differ in 3 categories: normal, improved and elite troops. And depending on which opponent type you are dealing with, your losses are larger or smaller. But you should clearly minimize your losses if you, as I said, use rangers. Because only these have the possibility to cover up and fight hidden thieves who dressed up as your own pioneers. Subsequently, carriers can bring back the stolen goods and you do not lose anything. And also in addition, the thief gangs do not become stronger permanently if you do not go against them or can fight them. But even bandits who do not dress up are effective to fight with. They have a much higher fighting power, and if you do not want to fight them, you should not go against them. If they don't attack, they put your pioneers in fear and terror, who stop their work and run away. And in addition, the bandits steal also valuable items from you. And even on the hardest maps, you actually made it as soon as you have trained enough rangers to defend against attacks and minimize losses. And here we see that even elite bandit has to give up against a ranger at some point. And so we come to tip number 12, the fight against mythical units such as sheems, ghosts or even werewolves. Because especially on the most difficult maps you have to deal with shamans, so ghosts, which put all your settlers in fear and terror, and units that are not equipped against them immediately lose all their specializations and equipment. And again, you can only attack them with rangers or the even more specialized fear knots. For starters, the first ranger troops do it, but they still have to take losses in the fight against the sheems. However, it is enough to generate an excess here, and you can also take in the various course areas. Because here you usually find high quality resources, which are otherwise difficult to reach. But as mentioned, there are even more specialized units here with the fear knots. However, these are not really effective against normal troops like thieves or bandits, but should really only be used against mythical units, such as sheems, so the ghosts or werewolves. For all other troops, thieves or bandits, you should use the rangers. Because the rangers have the best cost-benefit factor. In order to produce fear knots, we also need a light armor, but now a silver dagger, which we can produce in the weaponsmithy. We still don't need an iron processing for this. However, silver is usually a rare good, and you should not build a coin smithy, especially at the beginning of the game, because otherwise you exchange the valuable resource for coins, and these are much better used with fear knots. These tough ladies do a short process with all mythical creatures and are the only option, especially later against werewolves. And werewolves currently represent the maximum enemy, because they have by far the greatest fighting power and can turn any unit with a bite into another werewolf. But therefore we get to these mighty creatures, a little hint about the regular troops, our different soldier types. These make sense later in the game, if you can produce them en masse and have established copper and iron processing. But these are not really recommended, because the cost-benefit factor is very high and you are better off with the rangers. But let's go to tip number 13, the fight and the destruction of the werewolf plague. On the most difficult maps you will find werewolves, mostly in large numbers and also in different strength degrees. And since you have to take considerable losses here, if you attack them with regular units, you should only carry out a planned attack with the mighty fear knots. Because basically every defeated unit is also mutated into another werewolf. So you might strike with an attack group of regular troops 4 to 5 werewolves, but lose 15 men, which then means 15 more werewolves, so not a good calculation. So the only choice here are fear knots, because the losses are limited and you can effectively fight larger groups of werewolves. And with that, you have effectively fought the most difficult enemies in Pioneers of Pagonia so far. And last but not least, tip number 14. Not only monsters, robbers and thieves you find in Pioneers of Pagonia, but also neutral factions with which you can ally yourself and even join them in your kingdom. For this you can either do missions for the factions via the trading center and benefit, or impress them with the most diverse possibilities. And there are many possibilities here, from a larger kingdom, a larger border expansion via different storage capacities or individual goods. And these cooperations can be worthwhile, because you can generate rubies or gems over them, which you can't currently do otherwise. And also, the supply of mysterious locations can help to make friends as quickly as possible and to integrate the whole thing into your own kingdom at some point. And after they joining your kingdom, you only have to build a road. For trade orders, you only need a trading post, various carriers, which you can equip with a backpack, and the corresponding material. You don't have to do more. But Pioneers of Pagonia, of course, has more to offer and will be even more interesting with the future updates. And we are really looking forward to the next expansions and say goodbye until next time. Have fun and thanks for watching.